John, what do you make of the Youkilis signing, and do you think the Yankees are still going after A.J. Pierzynski?
You know, I've heard different things about that. Look, Youkilis, I'm not sure what he has left. Baseball people I've talked to think his back is going to continue to be an issue, and that he could break down again. His numbers, declined in a big way last year, and some people just doubt how much he's got left. But one thing about him, the guy, what a kind of a fierce competitor he is. He's going to bring that. He's going to be, I'm sure he's going to do everything he can to be ready to kind of make a name for himself in New York, coming over from Boston. He knows that, he's got the whole Red Sox rivalry thing behind him. But we've seen it other guys with Damon, guys like that. Yankee fans are quick to embrace guys no matter what, as long as they produce. So
quick to embrace and quick to turn on them.
Could he what?
I said quick to embrace and quick to turn on them, too.
Well, that's true, too. Yeah, that's true, too. I don't know. I mean, he'll play a solid third base, and then it's a matter of, what happens when A-Rod finally returns, whether or not he's going to be able to play third. I think Youkilis at least give him a serviceable season there, but he's not going to, I don't think he's going to be a difference maker, that's for sure. And then Pierzynski, I tell you, I kind of was pushing for Pierzynski then to sign Pierzynski all along, but, they're so stuck on this idea of getting the payroll under $189 million going into 2014 to avoid this new severe luxury tax that they seem unwilling to give anybody beyond a one-year contract. And Pierzynski is definitely looking to cash in. I think he had a career high with his 36 home runs last year. So I don't know. And they're worried about he's not he's an average type defensive guy. They really want a good defensive guy that can handle their pitching, but it's just that, you don't know if any of their young guys, well, Gromine in particular, is ready to take over. And we know about Cervelli and Stewart. They're just kind of run-of-the-mill type defensive catchers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, all I was going to say is I know we were talking a little while ago about the article you had written at the beginning of the postseason about things you thought they should do, and trading Granderson was one of them. I know we were just talking a little while ago about if they don't plan on re-signing him. I personally think they should trade him. Do you think there's any movement that they would trade him this offseason? Do you think there's any team that would give up what the Yankees would want in return for him?
Well, I think it would be a matter of, if they're trading him, they're not probably looking for a huge return. In fact, when I wrote that thing, I said they might have to take a chance on kind of a young, unproven guy. I mentioned it's Darren Ruff from the Phillies organization, but because he's making $15 million this year, and the teams, they only have control of him for 1 year, and teams are reluctant to give up, the top young guys if they only have control, if they don't have control for more than a year, and that's the case with Granderson. I think if the Yankees were to do it, it would be more the idea that they think they're not going to re-sign him after next year, so let's trade him now, get something for him, and save the money, save the $15 million that it's going to cost for him to play this year. I've heard they've talked to teams about him, but it doesn't sound like they want to do that right now.
Okay. And also, we were talking, I know yesterday I heard a report that the Yankees had signed Ichiro. Erich said that they were close. Do you know, what is final with that so far?
I know they're still talking. It sounds like there's still an issue. Ichiro's representative, it's definitely pushing for a 2-year contract, which, again, has been a sticking point for the Yankees for anybody this offseason. But there was some interest from the Phillies regarding Ichiro, so that to get him, they may end up having to go to 2 years, but they're trying to do a 1-year deal with him. And he definitely wants to come back. He loved playing when he came over, and it kind of revitalized his career. I mean, he was having a bad year, really a bad couple of years, and people really thought he was on kind of a steep decline. And he managed to kind of, I guess, dig deep and find his old self for a while. Yankee Stadium's a perfect place for him to hit, too. So I think he's a good fit, but I wouldn't want him for more than 1 year because you really don't know how much he has left. His on-base percentage was 280 when he came over. And, you don't know whether he just kind of, he was able to, kind of turn back the clock with adrenaline for a month or so, or whether this is real, whether it can last. But he's a good fit for a year. I wouldn't want him for more than a year.
Okay. Yeah, no, that definitely, I'm on the same page with you there. I didn't think more than a year. See, because like you just said, he's an aging superstar, and you don't know what you're going to get out of him.
The one thing I would say before we move on to the trades of the week, would they do something like the 1 year guaranteed and like a second year vesting option if he performs to expectations, whatever they may be? Would they consider doing something like that? And would that get it done?
Yeah, that's always a possibility, but they are really, everything they're doing seems to be to try and give them as much flexibility as possible going into next offseason, which could be pretty wild because you got all these guys whose contracts are going to be up.
They have.
These guys have signed the 1 year deals.
Yeah, they signed a lot of guys to 1 year deals, and like we talked about, Granderson's at the end of his contract. Cano's contract's up at the end of this year, and I think Jeter's is up at the end of this year as well, right?
Jeter, yeah, but he has a player option for $8 million, which is so it's going to be his call. But if he somehow came back and had another year like last year, he probably would decline that option because he would want more than $8 million for next season. So that could get interesting too, because we know the last time they had a negotiation, that got kind of ugly between the Yankees and Jeter.
I don't think there's any way that he could expect $17 million a year either. Again, out of another contract. So even if he signed a 1 or 2 year deal, his skills have declined to the point where he's not 17. But he's a great player. Don't get me wrong.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised these guys. Especially when he knows A-Rod's still making $25 million or whatever. That bugs the heck out of Jeter. And if he had a better year than A-Rod, he's going to say, "Hey, I deserve to get paid too."
Yeah, no, absolutely, and he might have a case for it depending on how he does. So moving on, obviously we had two pretty big trades this week, and we want to get your thoughts on them. We'll start with the Devil Rays trade. The Rays trade. I still want to call him the Devil Rays.
Yeah.
So obviously the Rays send James Shields and Wade Davis to the Kansas City Royals for their top prospect, Will Myers, and they get Jake Odorizzi, the top pitching prospect, Mike Montgomery, who has kind of fallen off in recent years but is still highly thought of, and the third baseman, Patrick Leonard. John, I want to get your thoughts. My one thing on this trade, I know everyone's saying that the Royals went all in for it. I personally feel they should have tried to figure out a way to get two top-name pitchers for what they gave up. Shields is good, but I feel like they're overvaluing Davis at this point. So I just want to know what you think on that.
Yeah, Davis is a guy who, they actually Rays put him back in the bullpen because he didn't quite meet the standards they want as a starter. He came up with a, highly touted big arm, but it remains to be seen whether he can actually turn that into, being a winning starter. That's what the Royals want him to start, obviously. But I guess I give the Royals some credit here just for going for it because they've had so many years of losing. They got a lot of good position player prospects. They didn't have the pitching. They were going to have to try something here. But I still, I don't know. They gave up a lot here, and I really like what the Rays did more so than the Royals, just because, you never know. These prospects sometimes don't pan out, but everybody I've talked to loves this kid Myers. I think he is the real thing. And Tampa, they've had pitching now for years. The one thing they needed was another big bat in that lineup, and if you put this guy, if he turns out to be the real deal and you put him in behind Longoria or whatever, that really changes that lineup. And they brought back this Odorizzi, who is supposed to be, it's like maybe a number 3 type starter, which is fine because they still have Price, they have Matt Moore, they're pretty deep with pitching. So I like what they did, and Montgomery is a project, kind of a highly touted guy who, as you said, fall off, but they think, maybe he might be a guy who needs to change the scene or whatever. So I like it more from the Rays' perspective, but you got to give the Royals credit. And this GM knows he's kind of on a hot seat there. He's been there for a while and hasn't done what they hoped. And it's time for them to win. I do like Shields a lot. I think he's a big time pitcher, one of the best changeups in the game. And I think in that AL Central, he might be a guy that could make a difference and maybe make them a contender, which is what they're looking for immediately. So. I understand what you're saying, and it's funny. They were talking to the Mets too, and they wanted this kid Wheeler from the Mets as well as John Neese, and the Mets weren't willing to give that up. But I think this was probably as well as they could have done as far as getting a top starter.
Yeah, I remember hearing that rumor that was what they wanted for Myers, I believe. I actually said on this show last week that I didn't think the Mets, I thought they were asking for too much trying to get Myers for Dickey, but I thought they should have tried to get a package out of the Royals involving Odorizzi, actually, because I've been a fan of Odorizzi for a couple years now. But, Andrew Friedman one of the best GMs in the game, and I personally think with this trade, he may wind up setting himself up for GM of the year this year. So
it could happen. You know, they because I tell you, with the payroll they have, this guy has really done great things just to keep them in contention year after year. You know, obviously they had some years where they were drafted. They had, you know, the number one pick in the draft there for a while, but they finally, all that stuff has paid off, and then now they found a way. This is the way they have to operate. They got to trade guys before they become too expensive because they're not going to be able to keep them, and this is what they're doing. So, yeah, I mean, this guy, they do a great job down there, no doubt.
And, yeah, no one does it better than the Rays on working on that shoestring budget. So
now, switching over to a team that necessarily doesn't do it all the right way.
Go ahead.
The Mets. What are they going to do with Dickey? Because I really feel like they kind of lowballed him with that 2-year, $20 million offer.
Well,
I couldn't agree more.
John, I actually was reading your article that you wrote, and you said that in your article you were saying that the Mets really did nothing but set themselves up in a really, really bad situation by lowballing him for a guy that's not asking for what a Cy Young winning pitcher would ask for a contract. And I was wondering if you could pretty much elaborate on what you mean by that in a sense of almost money-wise. Like, did the Mets almost set them up where they have to now add another, $10 million a year? Or, like, pretty much what I'm saying is, can you elaborate on what you meant by they really did themselves wrong by lowballing him so bad?
Right. Well, I just think that they could have got this done pretty quick because he was willing to sign. I think if they had offered this deal a month ago or so, before all the free agent signing started, I think Dickey would have signed this. This is basically what he was looking for. But then he started seeing what guys like Joe Blanton and Jeremy Guthrie were getting. He said, "Hey, I'm raising my price." So I think, and I know it's kind of a tricky situation because the Mets, they are in such a spot where I think they do need to trade a pitcher to get position players back because they have no young outfielders. They got to try something. And pitching is the one area where they have some depth, but it's tricky with Dickey. But I think even if they had signed him, it doesn't mean they still couldn't have traded him, and it would have given him an affordable contract for basically 3 years, the 1 year next year plus the 2-year extension, where teams I think would be just as likely to trade for him then. So I think it's going to end up costing them more now. Maybe not that much more. I think Dickey would still sign for maybe two for 24. He's asking 2 for 26 plus the $5 million option. So I don't think it's going to cost them huge money. But just the Mets, to me, they have kind of a credibility problem with their fans because everything that's happened the last couple of years. Signing Wright was a good step toward doing it to bringing the fans back, but they need to show that they're going to be committed to spending money on their other guys now, whether it's Dickey or guys that they're going to be able to have to sign. Maybe not this year, but next year when money comes off the books from Santana and the Bay contract. So that was kind of the point that I thought this was an opportunity to get this done and kind of, again, show people that they are moving in the right direction. So I still don't know. They still might trade Dickey, and that wouldn't necessarily be the wrong thing if you bring back, but you got to bring back the right guys. You got to bring back guys that are going to be able to help this team. And not just 2 years down the road, but I mean starting next year.
Yeah. See, the funny thing is, what you just said is you pretty much hit it right on the head. Me and Mike are both Mets fans.
Die hard.
And when they signed Wright, we're like, all right, you're making a smart decision. Let's maybe do 2 in a row for once. Let's see how that works for you, and maybe fans will actually be excited for the season to come. Because last year was such a tease. It was like the first couple months of the year, the Mets are relevant, they're competing, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, by the way, Mets fans, here's reality. So
and it's been that way for the last few years, really, because they just don't have the depth of talent to compete over a full season, especially offensively. You saw it catch up with them last year, and the bullpen. The bullpen was a major problem, and that falls back on Sandy Alderson. That's why I think this is really an important free off season for him, because this is his 3rd year now, and I know he's got the task of really building something that will last, and a big part of that is they needed to rebuild this farm system because it was so thin. But he's also hasn't done, he came with a reputation of being a guy that could make trades and find value in players. Going back to the whole Moneyball thing, he was kind of the godfather of Moneyball in Oakland. And he hasn't really done it. He made the trade for Wheeler. That's his saving grace, this kid Wheeler for Beltran. But other than that, the guys he's gotten for the bullpen and the little moves he's made haven't done a whole lot for this team. So I think he's under the gun here to make a trade that is really going to be a difference maker down the road for this team.
To me, it seems like they need a lot of help in the outfield. I mean, they have nobody in the outfield. What do you think they do this year as far as trying to get somebody to come out there and play? I mean, is Michael Bourne an option? What are their options to bring in somebody to come in and play the outfield?
That's the problem here, is they don't want to spend any real money, big time money on free agency. So the only option is a trade. And I really think from talking to their front office people, more kind of privately off the record stuff, that they all along have been looking past, 2012, 2013, really looking at 2014, where they are kind of gearing this team to be ready to win. So I really think they're going to end up, with some basically the table scraps in the outfield, if you will, guys, like Lucas Duda and Baxter, the other kid, and Neuenhuis. Those are their own guys. They're going to maybe pick up some of the free agents that don't get signed. Maybe not even until January. Maybe a guy like Matt Diaz, I guess, he can hit left-handed pitching. I mean, even Scott Harrison apparently seems to be asking for more than they want to pay him, even though he was a great hitter against left-handed pitching last year. They're going to go cheap this year, and that's why I said I think it's incumbent upon Alderson to make a trade. Either Nice or Dickey. Those are the two guys that can bring back important pieces, and I think he needs to make that decision to trade one of those guys. But, I mean, obviously you got to get the right package back.
Yeah.
Otherwise it doesn't work.
And
I was going to say, I know you got to get out of here, John. We appreciate you giving us a call. I just have one last question for you, and then I think Mike's got one more for you, too.
Yeah.
Sure.
Where do you think Josh Hamilton ends up signing? 'Cause I'm sitting here, and he's a guy to me that's a potential Triple Crown winner still. I know he's 32. He's starting to get up there. But he's got all the tools. Where do you think he lands? I know to me, the best place for him to land is back where he was to begin with in Texas, but do you think that's where he signs? Where does he end up?
I do think it's going to be Texas, just because nobody has blown him out of the water. He was hoping for a 7-year deal, something like that. But it all goes back to not so much. I mean, everybody knows how talented he is, but obviously he's had the history of the drug usage, the drug problems. I think that scares people off as far as a real long-term deal. That, and he's been kind of injury-prone as well. So I think this is the one guy that teams have said we're not going to give him that 7-year deal, or a huge deal like a Pujols got last year.
What kind of money is he looking for?
Oh, big money. I mean, I think he's going to get $20+ million a year, but he's just not going to get it for 7-8 years like you wanted. That's why I think the Rangers all along, they're willing to pay him. They're just not willing to commit those kind of years. So I think the Mariners, it sounds like the Mariners are really interested, because the Mariners are desperate to get any kind of big-time hitter up in that ballpark. But he, so from what I hear, he doesn't really want to play up there. I think he's going to end up back in Texas, but probably for no more than a 4-year deal.
So do you think the first team that throws him, say maybe a 5-year, $100 million contract, so $20 million a year, would steal him away?
It could. That's why people still, you hear talking to scouts and other GMs, especially at the winter meetings last week when I was down there in Nashville. You kept hearing that they're scared of the Yankees, saying the Yankees are laying in the weeds on Hamilton. Wait and see. They're still going to pop up and get him, because that's how people are trained to think, that the Yankees are always going to make that big move. But it doesn't seem like they want to do it, just because of that whole budget thing we talked about. So that's why I think Hamilton's going back to Texas.
Do you think that maybe trading Granderson would maybe free that move up for the Yanks?
Well, it works. It really does work that way if you think about it. If they did bring Hamilton in and they could get him on a relatively short-term, 4-year type deal, you could trade Granderson and his $15 million this year, and that would kind of even it out as far as the budget and the payroll. But then you're still paying him $20+ million a year for at least 3 more years, and that complicates the whole situation with Cano as far as them wanting to sign Cano and keep this. I mean, we all kind of in the business. We all kind of laugh about the idea of the Yankees having a budget, because we know how much they've spent over the years. But Hal Steinbrenner is not George Steinbrenner, and he seems determined to get this thing under this 189 and avoid. Apparently, the luxury tax itself would save that. It would cost them like an extra $50 million, and then by getting under that level, they're also now they're gonna actually share in the revenue sharing, so that they're gonna end up saving themselves maybe $100 million if they get under that level. That's why it's so important to Hal Steinbrenner. So all that plays into all these decisions, including Hamilton.
All right, Mike, you got John. How much longer we got you for? It's 10:28.
Yeah, I just another minute, so I got to jump on its conference call with my boss. So
well, we don't want to make your boss mad. That's for sure.
Well, I'm going to try to be quick here, John. I just want to switch back to the Mets and what we were talking about with trying to get an outfielder. I heard right after the James Shields thing happened that the Texas Rangers had offered Mike Olt for Dickey. Obviously, I think they were smart not to get that, but I also heard that the Rangers didn't want to throw in a second prospect. Was Leonys Martin's name mentioned in there, and do you think they would do that if they were able to sign Hamilton? Would they then turn around and be like, we'll give you Martin and Olt for Dickey? Would that be a possibility?
I think it would. I think it is a possibility, and those are the names I heard at the winter meetings that the Mets were most interested in. Mm-hmm. But since then, it's a kind of thing where the Mets they get excited about players' names, but then the more thinking about it they start to have reservations. Now, I've heard since then, as much as they like Olt, they're worried about actually, because they've had so many problems trying to convert guys to outfielders. This guy's a third baseman. They're worried about whether he could play the outfield. They're not sure if this kid, Leonys Martin, or Martin, however they pronounce it, is actually going to be a big-time hitter. They think he's a good outfielder. So it's kind of a gray area. I think, the Mets have been trying to find that perfect package. But I really think if it comes down to it, and the Rangers, they have offered Olt. They haven't offered the other piece that the Mets want.
Well,
if it comes down to it, I think the Mets might accept that if the Rangers say, okay, we'll do it.
All right. Well, John, I only have I need you to give me a number when I ask you this question, and we let you go. On a scale of 1 to 10, how interested are the Indians in Nick Swisher? This is a question out of our chat room here on SportsZone.
At a 1 to 10, I would say a 9 right now. It sounds like it's going to be a pretty good fit from what I hear. That Swisher's got some other teams interested, but the Indians think he'd be a real good fit there. And Swisher's been a guy that puts up numbers in the regular season. He just hasn't done it in the postseason. So I think there's a pretty good chance he winds up there, actually.